Hello and welcome to another YouTube episode for BuildASoil. Today we've got an FAQ, and today is FAQ 4 for season 6. And as per usual, Dean's chosen all of the YouTube questions from the videos, and I'm just gonna jump in and start. I haven't seen any of these, and we'll go through them one by one. Okay, first question. Chase says, is there a way to incorporate TEAS into an automatic watering system? We get this question a lot, and it depends on the automated watering system. My personal opinion is that this should be done separately and not through the automated watering. So what I mean by that, let's say you're using a blue mat or an earth box. In the earth box, on the day that the reservoir goes dry in the bottom, normally we would refill it with water. You can instead pull back the top of the earth box, put your compost tea into the top, and then recover it. And then the next day you can fill the reservoir. If it was through, say, the Tray to Grow or a blue mat, I would just prepare my tea and I would water it in from the top. And you could also, like on the Tray to Grow, turn the bottom water off. On the blue mat, if it adds more moisture, that's just gonna stop the blue mat from firing, so it won't really matter. So that's the way that we incorporate TEAS or Rootwise or any other product that we want into the soil while we're using an automated watering system. Hopefully that helps answer your question. The main reason that we don't do it through the automated system is no matter what, when it comes to a tea, we want all the goodness that comes with that. And that's gonna have some chunks and some biology, and that could clog up your system eventually. So I think that's the best way. Indo from Discord, what's up, man? I would love if my homie Jeremy would talk about purple nonsulfur bacteria, its benefits, any possible concerns, and its experience with using it, if any. All right, this is a good question, Indo, and I would have to do like a whole separate post, but I try not to talk about stuff that I have to research before I discuss. And so I'll give you like the layman's answer that I've come to understand from PNSB and a little bit of background on that. And then you can do some more of your own research. If it becomes a big topic, we can do some more research related to this topic through like our suppliers. But originally on PFA, we were talking about EM1 from the Terraganics distributor through Emro. And so their consortium of bacteria, even though it said lactobacillus on the bottle, that's more about labeling laws. EM1 is a yeast, a lactobacillus, and a purple nonsulfur bacteria. And so that was part of the original consortium. And the idea is that purple nonsulfur bacteria comes from an anaerobic environment, like at the bottom of a pond or somewhere like this, and it can actually utilize phosphorus. And so nature has different ways of utilizing energy, and it's fascinating to me. In fact, I'm doing some research right now on I think it's the Friedman protocol. I have to look up the name, but it's discussing cancer cells and how cancer cells are known to have a broken part of their actual structure, and therefore they have to go off of fermented sugar energy and amino acid. They can't actually use oxygen for their ATP process. But when it comes to the purple nonsulfur bacteria, this one is I believe it's a shifter. So it can actually move from aerobic to anaerobic, and it can help leverage phosphorus, is why it's so fascinating. So there's many products on the market that have different PNSB, and I'm not gonna get the names right. There's Rhodosumonas palustris and some others that are from this background, and I'm probably already getting it wrong because there's very specific names when it comes to like where in the order, kingdom, phylum, all that stuff that these actually sit. But the idea behind PNSB is that you're gonna get more phosphorus. And one of the things that we discuss when it comes to an organic system is that we may not have enough access to phosphorus like the hydro guys have that can just dump it on. So how would we get that? And what we see is that in nature, you don't need excessive amounts of phosphorus to be able to get the job done. And balancing it based on your potassium and learning about the way that it uses energy, I think that if you're gonna be using a phosphorus mobilizer, it makes sense to use something more than just a single species. And so behind me, I've got, let me see, Rootwise. This will probably help. This is the BioPhos. And so if I looked up in here, I believe the Pseudomonas are part of the PNSB. And so there's a couple of different ones in here, but there's also some others that are on the back, which you can look up and you can discuss with Rootwise. Their job is to create enzymes that actually facilitate these phosphorus mobilizers. So when you're working in nature, it's normally not there's not just one thing going on. There's a synergy of things happening. And so that's why we don't like to use specific, but we like to use multi-species that are balanced. And so I really think that the conversation about purple nonsulfur bacteria, I originally thought I would never offer a product specific to PNSB. Mainly because my belief was that you can get access to these biology components in your worm bin. But then what I realized was when I first started working with Rootwise was that we didn't want to get like quadruple phosphorus over potassium because that could cause other plant health issues, and the products that you're using to raise the phosphorus that much can come with other things. And so we found that matching them more 1-to-1 or 2-to-1, depending on whether you're talking about phosphate or phosphorus, and then using a phosphorus mobilizer is maxing out in both methodologies, meaning in nature, a lot of times these biologies would be used when there's lower phosphorus. So if we jack up the phosphorus too much, the idea is that nature doesn't waste energy. So if we jack up the phosphorus too much, there's almost no reason for these specialized bacteria to do their job or to create that relationship. And so I don't know that to be fully true, but I do know that instead of being excessive on phosphorus, just making sure that we address it and that it's there in generous amounts, and then using something like this that's more well-rounded has proven to be something that works really, really well for us. And I'm kind of going off on a side tangent because I'm not an expert in this area. And so I just want to preface it that, or I guess postmark this with the fact that PNSB is something that I could sit here and read for the next 4 hours about and then come back and record a video and pretend like I know what I'm talking about. But understanding and harnessing the BuildASoil way, knowing some of the things that we should be considering without being an expert in all of them is part of that process. We don't have to be an expert to get the benefits. You don't have to understand every pathway in the plant to elicit a response that we want. And so I hope that was a good conversation about it. Thank you, Indo, so much. That was a good question. Put that biophos back. Let's go on to the next question. All right, Duke Ellington from Discord. What's up, Duke? Would adding BAS essential oil blend into my humidifier help deter pests? You know, I don't know. I'd like to just say yes. I've had a lot of people say that it works and they do this, but I feel like, you know, like on certain humidifiers, they have an essential oil area where you open up the side and there's a cotton swab that you can put the essential oil on and close it up, and it brings that air in with it. I believe putting oils into your humidifier might actually mess with the ultrasonic humidity device that the water comes in contact with. Although we're talking about very, very small amounts, I also think that adding those very small amounts into the air is not really going to deter pests, at least the ones that we're concerned with, enough to warrant the practice. So my personal opinion is that this doesn't work. However, it may have some very small effect. And so that's my answer. Good question though. They're all good questions. So Ron from Discord. Dean, I love this. I love that we're getting Discord questions in here. This is great. So Ron from Discord, I've been running 3 earth boxes, 2 plants per, in a 5x5 tent for a couple years, and I've been loving it. But I want to upgrade to an automatic watering setup for 6 plants. What would you recommend? 6 Autopot XXLs, 3 Trader Grows, or some kind of blue mat setup? Thanks. Man, the 2 Trader Grows just completely ate up that 5x5 area with only 1 plant per Trader Grow. So I think if you ran 2 Trader Grows with 2 plants each, it would be like dominating that area. If you wanted to run 3 and literally don't veg, just plug 2 plants per and flip, you could fill that entire canopy like immediately. I love it. I love how simple it is. Now I haven't had to take it apart and like clean the wicking mat and deal with that yet. I've cleaned them, but I haven't dealt with taking the full bed off after a round and seeing what it all looks like. So there's that, right? Maybe some maintenance in between rounds, but man, it's a manageable amount of soil. So I really like the Trader Grow. Let's see, the other one, the Autopot XXL. I do like the Autopot XXL, and 6 of them would be really nice. I personally like the Trader Grow, so I'm just gonna say that. I'm trying to come up with like reasons, but it doesn't matter. My gut tells me Trader Grow is like where it's at. Let's see, or some kind of blue mat setup. Blue mats are great, and the main reason why I say that is it's more customizable to your shape. So if you really want to run like a 4x4 bed and do a blue mat, you totally could, but I'm having a lot of fun with the Trader Grow. So for what it's worth, I like the compartmentalization, the smaller beds that I wouldn't have ordered a bed that shape, but I kind of like it. I like that it's wide. I like that it mimics that earth box shape. And so I've been really, really happy with it. And I'll say this, if you get the Trader Grow, there's absolutely zero tinkering. It's just gonna work. And then you can do the off-on cycles if you wanna play with something. Otherwise, with the blue mat, we have the new pre-marked, pre-dialed caps. And so they're already marked, and it's made a huge difference in my personal experience this round, but there's still gonna be a little bit of tinkering required. And so just keep that in mind. If you like to geek out on stuff, you're going to love the Blue Mat. If you're just like, hey, I want to plug it in and never look at it, the Traded Grow is going to be your choice. Either way, both of them are going to work really well, so you can't go wrong. And I know that doesn't really fully answer your question, but that's like where I'm at. And so I'd rather just give you the truth. Iron Man from Discord, what is the best feed for a home worm bin? What I'm really asking is, what's best to get top-notch castings for cannabis? Is it best to use coco coir for browns, cannabis leaves for green, etc.? So this is a great question as far as peeling back the layers there. So there's many reasons that you could steer sort of the casting production process. And I've often thought that if I were to make a casting that was based on, let's say, shredded paper or something really basic, mainly carbon, very low nutrient content, that might be a really good casting for basing like a replacement for peat moss. However, if you want to make something that's more for flower and is full of phosphorus and potassium, you could steer it that way by feeding it more fruits, maybe even adding minerals and fishbone meal and amendments, so that you're working these amendments through that process, both lowering heavy metals while you do that, improving the biological availability, and kind of changing the state of those amendments. So that could be something that you steer. Otherwise, for just a general, like compost from castings, actually right here, I've got a worm bin, and next to the worm bin, I've got some gnarly barley. And part of that is because the research that Coot did on the sprouted seeds and the enzymes and how that speeds up the breakdown process that the worms require to be able to digest the material and break them down, it's all enzymatic. So sprouted seed teas are full of them, or sprouted seeds. And so the gnarly barley, the flour, it's finely ground and it's food grade, and it's all sprouted seeds that have then dried. So it's already sprouted and ground up, and the worms go insane over it. And apparently they can break it down really well because it's micronized, but it also bulks them up, speeds up the reproduction, does lots of cool things that Coot's been talking about for years. And so that's kind of my go-to. Otherwise, what we usually do is I put in like a broken bag of compost. One way to improve any compost is to have worms work it. I also have broken bag of soil sometimes that's in the bottom, and that has pumice in it. Now, a lot of times people don't add pumice to their worm bin, but it does increase the aeration, which speeds up the reproduction. And so I'm not an expert on worms, but my bin here, we throw fruit into and coffee grounds and cannabis leaves, and I feed the gnarly barley, and it's full of worms and life. I harvest from the bottom, I screen it into a tub, I put all the chunky stuff back in, and I take my screen castings and I take them home and put them on my whole property. So for what it's worth, you can use coco coir for browns and cannabis leaves for greens, etc., but you can also steer with that in mind that you might want something higher in nutrient for some reason or lower in nutrient for some reason. Otherwise, don't overthink it too much. I think that if you give it a pretty consistent feed, they'll get used to it, they'll break it down rapidly. If you're switching feeds all the time, it may take them a little bit longer, but we just use an urban worm bag here in the shop and it works great. So let's see, next question, Mickey Dirt, question about algae. I don't see any on your beds or pots, but I see it on other living soil grows. Do you clean it or spray it with something, or would you say it's due to overwatering and high heat? I've even seen beds wrapped in plastic that's covered in algae. Any suggestion for those problems? Thanks for everything you do. So beds being wrapped in plastic came because they were drying out too quickly. A lot of people wanted to hold that in. That was before the living soil beds from Grassroots came out, which was basically taking that idea and incorporating it right into the product and leaving that wicking space in the bottom where it's not plastic lined so the roots can still air prune. And it works really well. I'm looking at a 3x3 bed right here, and you're right, I don't see any algae on it. I do see calcification on it and brown spots, but no algae. I have seen algae before. A lot of times our canopy gets pretty dense. It blocks the light out, and that stops the algae from growing. Other times it may be due to overwatering, it may be due to environmental conditions, but when I look around a healthy farm and there's standing water and moving water and spots with rocks and everything else, you see algae, almost like it comes from the air. I mean, you see it in the rainwater collection bucket. So I think algae is part of this process. I'm not really scared of it when I see it. We actually sold a couple of different specific species of algae in the past that would produce oxygen and be for like wastewater treatment and different jobs. And a lot of people, found benefit to adding them to their soil. Now, the algae that you see normally, I don't like it either. And so if I had like a way to discourage it or clean it, I'd tell you. I think it just like happenstance. I'm looking at, even on this like mom plant, I don't see algae. So it may be because it's so dry in Colorado. It may be just the canopy, like I said, but I don't see it that often. And so anywhere where you have light and you have water and you have the possibility for that to grow because there's organic material, you can see it pop up. So it may just be these facilities or these photos that you're seeing, but I'm not too scared of algae. But if we're no-tilling, cleaning it off the side, I probably wouldn't worry about it too much. But that's just my personal opinion. Reynolds, is there a pot or bed that is too big for just one plant? No. Planting into the earth is like the whole earth for one plant practically, right? I mean, not really, but it's a big pot and that works really well. So no, I would say there's not. What I will say is there is one that is impractical. I mean, if you're gonna have 1 million gallons of soil for one plant, it would be a waste in many different ways. But as far as discouraging you from considering a setup with a big pot versus a slightly smaller, just the bigger the better in my opinion. It's more horsepower under there. It's harder to deplete that soil. The bigger bed is more like a slower moving vehicle. And so it's got like, once it gets up and running, it takes very little energy to keep it in motion. But steering it, it's gonna take some energy. What I mean by that is, in a little container, if you overwater, it's not that big of a deal, it'll dry out kind of quick. But in a big container, you take all that energy and you really oversaturate it because you have a problem. That could be a little bit harder to deal with than in a smaller container. Now, it's not the end of the world. There's lots of tactics for overcoming these things, but that's all I will say when it comes to container size is if you really mess something up in a big container, that might be slightly harder to deal with and slower to move around as far as the qualities of the soil than it is with a smaller container. But I personally think the benefits outweigh any of those concerns and bigger is better. So let's see the affliction. Hey Jeremy, love the video and the knowledge you spread. I live in Thailand and I'm trying to do it yourself your craft blend to use in my garden. The only ingredient I can't source is langbeinite. Could I replace it with sulfate of potash? If so, do I mix in with the other ingredients at the same ratio as I would langbeinite? Yeah, that would be fine. And I'll explain the differences, but craft blend was just a mixture of 15 high quality ingredients. And then what we wanted to do is balance the P and K for the label to be 2-to-1 so that it mirrored a balance of what we were missing in most compost. Most compost, when you get it, if it's really good, it'll be great in biology and organic matter and all these things, but it's oftentimes lacking in like calcium and phosphorus. And so that's a feature of craft blend, but we don't usually need that much potassium. And so the sulpomag or the langbeinite is sulfur, potassium, and magnesium. And typically when it comes to soil testing, very rarely do we look at a soil test and say, oh, I need sulfur, I need this much potassium, and I need that much magnesium, I'll buy that product. So most people just use magnesium sulfate or potassium sulfate and those because they both have sulfur. So that would be like the way to independently do it. So you could get Epsom salt and potassium salt and you'll basically have sulfur, potassium, and magnesium all in one product, just like the sulpomag. It just comes out of the mine that way, and so that's why they offer it. Now, when it comes to making your own craft blend, because there's 15 different parts, adding one part of the sulfate of potash would be totally fine, and it'll be very, very similar to just using the sulpomag. The numbers will be different, but as one part out of 15, it'll absolutely work. And then the other thing to consider, it doesn't have to be exactly the same as craft blend, and it's gonna work really well. We have an article on our blog section at BuildASoil, or you can just probably Google BuildASoil Complete Organic Fertilizer. And we share with you how to make your own complete organic fertilizer. And Steve Solomon talked about this in his book, The Intelligent Gardener. Essentially, he would mix a seed meal for the proteins and the nitrogen, some source like that. Seed meal is very diverse. And then with that, a phosphorus source and a calcium source. And that creates a very diverse blend that's like creating a complete meal. You'll be good to go. So hope that answers your question and gives you a little bit of background. All right, let's see. Okay, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 more. This is great. Thanks, Dean. Okay, Shields. When you pop seeds in the cocoa coins and place them under the dome for germination, what light schedule do you use? Darkness like a paper towel method or straight to 18:6? I found any of it works. Doesn't matter to me. You can do 24 hours of light or you can do 18:6. Oftentimes I'll just do 18:6, but other times I'm plugging in like an area just to pop seeds and I may not have a timer and I'll run it 24 hours and it does not matter to me because as soon as the seeds pop, I'm gonna be putting them in a veg room anyways. And in that beginning period, it doesn't matter. It's arguable that it doesn't matter. You can go 24 hours on all your cannabis for all of the veg period. I personally believe that it's better to have some night cycle. When it comes to managing things with seedlings, there's many reasons. So if it's in a cooler garage and you're starting seeds and the lights off period means that you have to add heat when normally you wouldn't, it might be way easier just to leave the light on for 24 hours until you figure out the next step. So as always, focus on the weakest link, and some of these little things are just nuance. It doesn't matter, it'll all work. Nature's pretty amazing. Okay, good question, Shields. Terpy10, CO2 question. Since plants aren't photosynthesizing at night, do you need to maintain CO2 levels at night or only when the lights are on? We don't do any of that. It happens all naturally. We just bring fresh air in. And we should always have fresh air. However, the plants aren't photosynthesizing. They're not going to be using it. But I feel like they're still breathing. They're not transpiring. They're not running. They're not working. But they're still alive. And so you wouldn't want to like completely deplete it. But they don't need any elevated levels. And so if you're supplementing CO2, I would refer to somebody who's an expert in CO2 supplementation. And from what little I understand, it's more than just meeting some number. It's about making sure there's the minimum amount, especially in a sealed room because it can be catastrophic. But also there's timing where you would apply more during different phases. And I'm just not familiar with it because we just bring fresh air in and it always works. At night, typically, we don't worry about VPD, and I never really worry about CO2 because we're using fresh air and it's not a sealed room. So even if the fans are off, it's not gonna like run out of air. So hopefully that helps answer your question. To be more direct, I never worry about it, and not at night. Y5413 asks, can you use a regular organic aloe powder at Walmart as a wetting agent? Yeah, I mean, you don't really need a wetting agent. I like them if there's been some dryback. I like them when you're transplanting a whole bunch of plants and the water's just dumping through. Like there's so many times when using it works. Using it for a foliar spray, like it may not matter that much. We used to have people that would use the liquid aloe. It does have some citric acid in it, but that's broken up pretty much immediately. So you can just get the stuff that's liquid at the store. The powder, I would be cautious about multiple ingredients. Oftentimes these aloe powders, they're gonna have other ingredients. So for human use, besides the aloe, they might add some salt for electrolytes or other ingredients that could be problematic. So look and make sure it's pure. The other thing is there's a lot of bullshit aloe products on the market. There's different methods of drying it, from spray dried to freeze dried. For the compounds that we're looking after, we really want something that was harvested from mature aloe plants near the equator that are 4 to 5 years old and are freeze dried immediately after harvesting. When it comes to aloe, we have two products. We have the inner fillet, which is the flake. That's more like what you would find out there in the market because it's illegal to sell the whole leaf for human consumption. You can only sell the inner fillet because the content of aloin in the outer leaf is a managed like health product and you're not allowed to sell it. But when it comes to like a fertilizer, our horticultural aloe includes part of the outer leaf and the inner leaf, which adds about 70% more constituents based on what's in that leaf and how we process it and freeze dry it. And that's super rare. So I think it's best to just grab our powder. But to be fair, I think you probably could use all that stuff as well. So good question. Red asks, I have to ask about the microbes. You add them every time you water. Don't you worry about overpopulating them? I mean, don't they naturally multiply in a favorable environment, or are they sterile and just die off? Good question. We don't add them every time we water at all. And I don't recommend people to do that. Some people do, like the world record pumpkin growers, they are going hard on it. But this is the thought that a lot of us have come to about this, is when you're adding a balanced amount of really beneficial biology, you're deploying them into an environment where the most beneficial will be selected for the particular job at the particular time. And then it's going to do it regardless. And so if you're adding, let's say 100 microbes, might be a million, who knows, but let's say 100 microbes and only 2 are needed right now. Well, I don't know which 2. Here's the buffet, it's full. You choose. Later in flower, I don't know which ones you want. Here's all of them. And so I don't think we're worried about overpopulating. Nature handles that like viciously. It's amazing how quick populations can change. And so I feel like if nature needs one of these at the particular time and wants to create a relationship with it, it's going to be steering that from its own root exudates. There's going to be a whole process in place and it's going to happen in the soil. And so it's better to just give it a full buffet of what we know to be most beneficial from the latest research and what we've seen to be in the real world working, and let it choose. But for our practical experience, I like to apply a beneficial like Rootwise right at root emergence, because everything is biologically based. From inside the root tip, there's biology spinning in and out of it, to inside the head of the trichome, there's biology working inside there. And so the whole world is based on this biology. And I like to use a little bit in the beginning, and I like to use a little bit maybe later in veg, and then I like to switch to biofos and use that a couple of times. So I'm not of the belief that we need to go extra hard every single time we water. But I will say, when people are trying to break world records and they only have one season to prove it and to make it, they're grabbing a lot of these like Rootwise product and they're using the Microbe Complete indoors every watering. Then they're using the enzymes in the biofos every single watering outside as the pumpkin or whatever they're growing for world records starts to fruit and flower. And for them, there's zero downside to doing that other than the budget. But when you're growing to break a world record and you're after that last 1%, that last 2%, they're seeing benefit to doing this. And so borrowing from that, borrowing from not wanting to be wasteful, believing in less is more, I feel like you probably don't need any of these products, but utilizing them a few times widens that margin of success and limits some of the problems dramatically. So the more I've learned about like mold that can be growing in the grow room and how effective a lot of the products are in root-wise that would be mitigating and out-competing that instead of trying to sterilize, it leads me to believe there's other reasons to utilize these types of products, but man, not every watering. And that's my thought on out-competing, overproducing one versus the other. I think nature's got our back there, especially in a bigger bed of soil. That was a great question, Red. Okay, I know I say that a lot, but it's like, I'm just reading these for the first time, and I like answering all these because now it's out there and people can learn from this. And then that furthers my research. And they say that the most that you learn is when you're teaching. And so that resounds with me. Like I feel that for sure when I'm doing these questions. So thank you, everyone. Last question, Will, why don't you add mustard seed meal to your soils that you sell to guarantee no gnats? We do, but we don't guarantee anything. Nature finds a way. It's like Jurassic Park when they're like, oh, there's not going to produce any more dinosaurs. And somehow they were able to switch DNA, switch the ability to create offspring. And so mustard, while it's phenomenal, and we add it to our soil, and it absolutely makes a difference, I can't guarantee it. We've got a new BTI, a high potency BTI product that we just released, WDG 3000, and we carry it at BuildASoil.com in an 8-ounce bag. It's a phenomenal product. It works really well. And we could put that in our potting soil, but I still can't guarantee it. The manufacturer said that he would put a exempt article certificate on there and allow us to put it in our bag that this will be free from any fungus gnat larva. I just don't believe in making those claims because nature is so powerful. I'd rather teach you how to deal with these things. And so to be clear, we do add the mustard seed meal to our recipes and it does make a significant difference. However, there's only so much that we can do. And then the BTI product works great. You should get it. It'll make a huge difference at your house. But even if we added that to the soil, there's no guarantee. And other guarantees too, like some people will say water only, like as a guarantee. And to me, water only means how big is your plant? How big is the container of soil? And so the more I learn, the less I'm willing to make absolutes. But I do want you to know that we care. And without sterilizing the compost, we've done everything that we can, from finding the mustard seed meal and adding it in there, as well as offering this new BTI product. That coupled with like the OrganiShield, we've seen just dramatic drops in gnat population almost immediately. And then they don't return when you're somewhat regularly using that BTI product. So check it out, WDG 3000. It's available at BuildASoil.com right now. You can also type in like fungus gnat eliminator at BuildASoil.com and it'll pop up if you can't remember that. Otherwise, this has been the FAQ 4 for season 6. Endo, thanks for the PNSB drop. That was a difficult question as far as there's a lot of areas of discussion when it comes to PNSB. So if you'd like to elaborate, I can bring this to another FAQ. Is there something specific about it that you'd like to know? Otherwise, Dean, thank you so much for pulling questions from our Discord community. For those of you that don't know, when we were originally on YouTube, they allowed us to monetize this channel. And with all of our viewers, the hopes was that it would help pay for the video editing and some of the time that it takes. And YouTube revoked that opportunity from us, so we cannot monetize it. And so a number of you banded together and you've been paying to the Patreon. So we're so grateful for it. The YouTube channel wouldn't be possible without all of you. So I really, really appreciate you very selfishly stepping up to donate to something that has been free and you don't have to, and you don't really receive extra benefit for doing so. So thank you so much. That being said, it was cool to see some questions from the Discord. So until next time, that was FAQ 4 season 6. Thank you so much. As always, like, subscribe, tell your friends about these, and maybe we'll get your question answered if you interact on our YouTube channel. Until next time, I'll see you on the next BuildASoil video.